Okay, so we're going to begin. Tonight we're going to talk about Purim, since it is very relevant. Tomorrow is Tanit Esther, the fast of Esther. And Friday will be B'ezrat Hashem, the Chag itself. And as you know, Am Yisrael celebrates holidays not just to remember an event in the past. It really has a lot of meaning. There's a lot of messages in this what appears to be a very happy holiday where all the kids put on masks and have a good time. We have a lot of wine to drink. Nevertheless, there's a lot of messages. This important holiday has a fast before the holiday begins, Tanit Esther, which also has great significance. The Chachamim would not have made us just fast because we fasted in the past, just to remember the past. I mean, nobody likes fasting. After a couple hours of not having your cup of coffee in the morning, your head hurts, right? Or after a couple of hours of not eating, you're hungry. And nobody really enjoys fasting unless, of course, they're on a diet and they have no choice. But obviously, every fast has great significance, and it is important for us to participate properly in the Chag in order to experience the spirit of the holiday, but also in order to really try to get the message of what it is that the rabbis wanted us to remember. And every part of the holiday really brings back a little bit of what happened in the past. So during these days that we celebrate Purim and eventually Pesach, Shavuot, we're actually experiencing a little bit of the past. It is very, very important when we approach the holiday of Purim or any other holiday that we understand as much as possible what is going on and that we have the right perspective. And when I say the right perspective, I mean the word hashkafa. Hashkafa means outlook. What is it exactly that is happening? What has happened? How do we explain it? How do we explain the actions of the various players? Mordechai, Esther, Haman. What exactly is going on? Because it would be a shame not to understand, and it's very easy not to know because it goes by so quickly. Before you know it, Purim is over, and all the good mothers are getting ready to clean up the house for Pesach. The hard work begins. And what a shame. Purim is a very, very significant holiday because of its message. Rabbis tell us that this is the one holiday that will not disappear even when Mashiach comes. Kol hachagim mitbatlim chutz mipurim. All the holidays will pretty much go away or will not be as important. Purim will always be there. Why will all the holidays go away? Well, imagine Pesach. What do we celebrate Pesach? Yetziat Mitzrayim, that we left Egypt? Well, soon we're going to be celebrating that we left America, not Egypt. B'ezrat Hashem, all of us very soon will be moving to Israel. So this will be a big holiday when Mashiach comes, when the final redemption occurs. It will be a big celebration of the ingathering of all the diasporas. And Yetziat Mitzrayim will somewhat be forgotten. It will be secondary. The celebration, therefore, will be for the new holiday. But Purim, the spirit of Purim, what Purim represents, Purim contains in it Mechiat Amalek. It contains in it the ultimate elimination of our greatest enemy of all. The greatest enemy of the Jewish people, the greatest enemy of Hashem, and that is Amalek. Because of what it represents, the agenda of Amalek is contrary to the agenda of God, and because of that, it is a big celebration. And that celebration of Purim will still continue to be with us when Mashiach comes. Before I begin to talk about the various points of Purim, I want to explain this point that I mentioned, Hashkafa Nechona, having the right outlook, knowing what to do, knowing what is right from what is wrong. People have many opinions, but that's all it really is. It's an opinion. It's really worthless if it's not founded on some fact, on something. Otherwise, I mean, you're entitled to have an opinion, but it may be meaningless unless it is rooted in something very, very strong, in tradition, unless it's common sense, unless you can prove it. And if you pay close attention to what goes on in Megillat Esther, to the story, you should have some questions. I hope most of you know more or less the story of Purim, right? So I don't have to go through the whole Megillah. But basically the script involves an imminent, very imminent danger on the Jewish people who are being threatened by this Haman Rasha, this wicked Haman, who's just been appointed pretty much second in command. And he's evil because he's Mizera Amalek, from the seed of Amalek. And all he has in mind, his agenda, Amalek's agenda, is Lashmid, Larog, Ulabed. That's the only nation in the world whose agenda is to destroy the Jewish nation. And if you want to have an idea of what kind of an agenda Amalek has, just look at what the Nazis had in mind. Their agenda was called the final solution. In other words, the final solution involves Lashmid u'la'areg et kol ha'yehudim, all the Jews, not just in their country who are giving them a hard time. Everyone, the women, the old, the young. No other nation would do something as barbaric and as cruel as Amalek to the Jews. And that is why we have a special mitzvah. Mehiyat Amalek, timchet zecher Amalek, don't have any pity on him whatsoever. Do unto him what he wants to do unto you. But it's not just revenge, it's not just a physical war, it's really much more of a spiritual war. Lashmid, la'arog, ula'abed, that's very descriptive of what he intends to do. Lashmid means to completely destroy. Destroy what? What do you destroy completely? You kill somebody with a bullet, you've killed him. What does it mean, Lashmid? Lashmid means to completely eliminate, completely destroy the soul. Because even if you succeed in killing somebody's body in this world, his soul is still around. For those of us who believe, of course, B'asharat HaNefesh, that the soul, which is really the essence of the human being, continues to survive even after one's death. So of course it's tragic and we feel bad and we mourn and we cry. And it's a mitzvah to feel bad for somebody who has left us, especially young, especially one who did not have a chance to fulfill his mission. So we definitely felt sorry for him and we will miss him. But is he gone? No, he's not completely gone. But if somebody's neshama is destroyed, if somebody's spirit, his soul, is completely gone, that has great repercussions. That is a greater tragedy. That is what Amalek wants to do. Amalek wants to sever our ties with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And how does he do that? We are very much tied to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that we rely on him, we believe in him, and we believe in him not only that he created the world, but Shehu Mashgiach. V'hu oseh kol ha'ma'asim. This is one of the principles of Judaism. Shehu asa ve'oseh v'ya'aseh et kol ha'ma'asim. Not only did he create the world, he's in charge and responsible for everything that happens. At least he's aware, and at least he controls. It doesn't mean that he wants certain things to happen, but he's in charge, he's the boss. And that is called Hashgacha. Comes along Amalek, umetzanenet ha'emunah. His danger is that he cools off people's emunah. It's all mikre, it's all coincidence. Nothing happened by divine decree, it's all by chance. It's act of nature, etc. And that is how he destroys the emunah of the Jew. That is how he intends to destroy the Jewish people, not only physically but spiritually. So Lashmid is on the neshama. La'arog is the physical body. That we not serve Hashem, that we do not learn Torah, that we do not fulfill mitzvot. Ule'abed, which means also to destroy, it's talking about destruction of money. To take away our monies, to take away anything that belongs to us, that can help us do Hashem's will. So this is Haman's agenda. He's appointed to power. And that should have raised the eyebrows of all Jews. For if they really had emunah in Hashem and understood sheyesh mashgiach la'olam hazeh, that there's not only a creator, but that he actually supervises everything, they would have asked us, wait a minute, why is Obama a candidate, b'chlam? Did you hear me well? Why is he even a candidate? Why? I mean, why him? They have nobody else? Most of you would be better candidates, I think, unless you're not a citizen. But everything is min hashamayim. And even though al pi derech hateva he's not supposed to win, for obvious reasons that I don't have to explain, but if he does, you will know that this is the greatest indication of all that Hashem has something up his sleeve. Something very, very important, something very, very unique and strange. But obviously there's a reason for it, because if he does win, it was his decision, not the citizens of this country. Because deep down, I don't think the majority of this country wants that candidate as their leader, for obvious reasons. So, nobody says anything when he goes to power, this Haman Rasha. Not yet, until the decree comes down and hits them hard, and now they're afraid. They're afraid for their lives. Now they start yelling, now they start complaining, now they start worrying about what they should do. Comes along this Mordechai and makes things worse. Mordechai makes things apparently worse. We have a saying in Aramaic, Ta'ala be'idnas ghidle. A fox, when he's the ruler, you bow down to him. But he's not a lion. Why should I give him respect? He's just a little fox. If the fox is in charge, if he is the president, you give him respect. Hashem gave him respect. Hashem put him in that position for a reason. You don't want to mess around with him. You can get into trouble if you do. He's the one that's in control, even though he doesn't deserve it. Even though he's not an important figurehead. But he's now in charge. He's the one in power. He has within his control to harm people. Haman has that power. So one of the questions is, Mordechai, lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Where's your common sense? Why don't you bow down to him? Why don't you give this man kavod? It's a very, very interesting question. For those of you who remember, not too long ago, but several years ago, when Yitzhak Rabin, I think, was still Sar HaBitachon, the Minister of Defense, you may recall an incident that occurred where a bus in Israel was hijacked by some terrorists. The Israeli army caught up with them, took the terrorist alive, and later eliminated him. And there was a big scandal. How do you take a terrorist that had pretty much given up and eliminate him? This convention or that convention, they forgot about all the conventions. They did what was right. But the question is, why was there such a scandal? So they asked Mr. Rabin the question, Mr. Rabin, why is it that your policy somehow, official policy, is not to kill terrorists if you take them alive? We have a famous rule in Judaism, whoever comes to kill you, you kill him first. Isn't that common sense too? All right, you caught him and he's not dead yet, send him to court first. No, there is a reason. The Torah is very clear what to do with bad people. So Mr. Rabin gets on the radio and gives 3 logical explanations. So listen carefully to his reasoning, to the policy. We don't kill just anybody, any terrorist. Reason number 1, if he knows that he's going to be killed, he will fight to the end. And in this way, if he knows that he has a chance to go to prison, eventually he may go home, he won't fight to the end. Interesting logical explanation, right? Second explanation, if he's alive, we can get a lot of intelligence from him about everybody else, what they're doing. We'll get it out of him. We know how to get information. If he's dead, we can't get information. Third explanation, klaf mikuach, as we call it in Hebrew. He's a card. If our prisoners are taken by them, our soldiers are taken by them, we can have an exchange of prisoners. If we kill them, we don't have that. Did you hear? 3 logical, I think logical explanations. But is he right or wrong? Well, it depends if you have Da'at Torah, depends with who you consult with. If you consult with Torah authority, all those explanations don't mean anything. You do what the Torah says. Recently we read about Shaul HaMelech's big mistake. And because of his mistake, he paid dearly. He lost the melucha. He lost his position of being king, the first king, A tzaddik, Shaul, a tzaddik, a humble man, a great man, lost his job because of one small mistake. It wasn't so small, but relatively. Shemuel meets up with Shaul. What is all this noise that I hear? They had just fought a battle with Amalek. And what are they supposed to do with Amalek? Eliminate everything, everybody, including the animals. Shemuel tells Shaul, what is this noise that I hear? Oh, that's the noise of all the cattle and the sheep of Amalek. What? Why didn't you destroy them like you're supposed to, like you're commanded by the Torah? The people felt that we have such a large quantity of animals, we're going to make Hashem happy, we're going to bring all these sacrifices to him. Shemuel tells Shaul HaMelech, wait a minute, you think Hashem needs all these animals? Or that he wants, or that it's more important that you do what is right in his eyes, what he commanded you to do? What's more important to him, all these animals? You think he really needs the animals? Or does he need that you do what he said to do? So then, Shaul HaMelech confesses, Yareti ta'am, I was afraid of the people. In other words, because of political reasons, he was afraid of them. That is why I left them. He left Agag alive too, the king of Amalek. In the end, he confesses that his fear for the people, for the citizens, was too great to overcome. And that is why he made a mistake. Had he been strong and only followed the Da'at Torah, the correct thing, then he would have still would have remained king. Sometimes people use all kinds of reasoning, and it may be logical, it may make some sense, but when it goes contrary to what the Torah says, it's wrong. And if there's any doubt, then at least clarify it with who? With Da'at Torah. If you want to do the right thing, you want to consult with the experts. You want to consult with those who know what the correct hashkafa, correct outlook is in a particular situation. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, at the end of the Second Temple era, the Romans are about to destroy the Bet HaMikdash. They're coming in, killing a lot of Jews, and the Jews are putting up a little bit of a fight. Who is the one that's putting up the biggest fight? The Biryonim. The Biryonim are a group of people that I somewhat spoke about them when I mentioned the Erev Rav. They were a gang of people, Jews, religious, who loved to fight, who did not want to give up, did not want to give in. Says, so what? The Romans, we're going to defeat them. We're going to fight against them. We're going to go out against them, and we're going to win. We're very strong. And they were very, very strong, very powerful. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, don't fight anymore, because all you're going to do is cause more bloodshed. What do you mean more bloodshed? We have a chance to win. Rabbi Yochanan says, no. I know by Ruach HaKodesh that this is a lost case. The Bet HaMikdash is about to be destroyed. It's a decree. So let's therefore salvage whatever it is that we can. More Chachamim, so we have Torah left over, so we have Jews left over. Don't fight a losing war. And they did not want to believe in him. They really thought that if they tried their best, they could win. They had a chance. But they were wrong. Some people want to use that example of Yochanan ben Zakkai to our situation today. Why fight the Arabs? Just give up. Just give in and leave. Just like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Chaz v'shalom, never make that comparison. He had Ruach HaKodesh. He knew what was going to happen next. He knew that the Bet HaMikdash is about to be destroyed. There was no sense in continuing to fight the Romans. But this is a fight for our survival. We're back after close to 2,000 years to Eretz Israel. It's obviously all from Yashamayim. It didn't just happen because some people were Zionists and decided to take over the land of Israel, like some want to claim. The fact that they succeeded, the fact that hundreds of thousands and then millions of Jews have come to Eretz Israel shows that this is part of the process of the redemption of the Geulah. Not everybody agrees. Not everybody thinks that this is part of the process, but it's definitely a beginning. If many of the prophecies are coming true and the land of Israel is blossoming and it's being reestablished and rebuilt, that means obviously something is happening. We're not in full agreement with the way things are happening there, not with everything, but nevertheless, you can't just say, oh, let's give it away, let's not fight. The bigger problem today in Israel is that they don't realize who the problem is. They accuse the Arabs, and they say, okay, we have a problem with the Arabs, therefore let's build a wall. And if the wall doesn't work, let's kick them out. If that doesn't work, let's teach them a lesson. Let's shut down their electricity. Let's blockade them. You're avoiding the main problem. It's not them, it's you. We are the problem, not them. Whenever we have trouble with non-Jews, whenever we have trouble with the enemy, whenever we have war, it's because there's something wrong with us, not with them. If we would be okay, whenever you read Tanakh, you will come through a very sweet passage, occasionally, very rarely, occasionally, Vatishkot haaretz 40 shana. Trouble, 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 trouble. All of a sudden, peace in the land for 40 years. 40 years of peace and quiet. Can anybody here remember Israel having 40 peaceful years recently? 40 peaceful years recently? I don't know of any country, maybe Switzerland, maybe, that have had somewhat quiet. Obviously, there's something wrong. Not with them, but with us. Obviously, they're not right. I'm not saying that they are right. But if they are stirring up trouble, then we should look at ourselves. That is what we call correct hashkafa. Having the right outlook. Mordechai does something incredible. Apparently, he doesn't give the respect to Haman that he should. On the contrary, he says, I'm not bowing down to you, you don't deserve it, you are Amalek. Isn't he endangering the Jewish people? We said before, give him kavod. No, but Mordechai sees things clearly. He says, wait a minute. It's not Haman the problem, it's us. We are the ones that are to blame for this. Then I have to find a way to fix this. Not to just go along with it. Unless, of course, he knew that this was a terrible decree, that there was nothing to do. Of course, he would go along, he would save. But obviously, he knew that something has to be done to stop it. And what is he going to do? He's going to do something exactly the opposite of what the Jews were doing at that time. And what were they doing so bad to deserve this terrible decree? So the rabbis tell us that very soon after the destruction of the first temple, they're in Galut. This is going to be a Galut for 70 years only, a very short diaspora. They went to Iraq, Babylonia. Some of them later went to Persia. Eventually, they all scattered all over the place. And when time came to go back home, only 44,000 Jews went home. Not everybody went home. A lot of the people in Iran made themselves good businesses, and they said, the money is good here, we're not going back. And they have been there ever since, until they decided after the revolution it's time to leave. So some Iranian Jews have been there until Khomeini came to power. Yes, they've been there. Business was good. And there's still some people there, and they're going to leave soon too. Not everybody came home. That was a big shame, big tragedy, because unfortunately, because they stayed where they were, they assimilated too. Until Ezra Sofer gave them a big speech. How dare you intermarry? How dare you take goyot? And of course, they broke down. They of course understood that he was right, and they divorced their wives. It was a very effective speech, but you can see from the short time that they were there that there was problem already with assimilation. In any event, the Jews right now are in Persia. They are faced with extinction, and Mordechai goes against common sense. Doesn't bow down to Haman. Why? Because he realizes that it's not Haman, it's the Jews. And what did the Jews do? They've assimilated. Even though it's so short after the destruction of the temple, they're already bowing down to the idols. In what way? They're participating in the meal of Achashverosh, enjoying themselves. And what's so bad about the meal of Achashverosh? Maybe there was kosher food there, right? Maybe he served choresht kosher, right? Right? Who knows? Maybe everything was glad kosher. No. The kelim of the Bet HaMikdash was there. The vessels of the Bet HaMikdash, some of them were there. And here they're having a good time. Instead of mourning, you just lost your home. And it caused a tremendous accusation against them. So Mordechai realizes, Avodah Zarah is part of the problem. But they didn't really mean it. They just bowed down, gave kavod. Just like in the Persian culture, each one tells you when you're right in front of a restaurant, each one tells each other, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go. They're standing 1 hour outside of the restaurant, no, you go, you go, you go, you go. Just, so it's just make-believe. It's not, they don't really give that much kavod to each other. It's just make-believe. It's part of their... So anyway, the whole gezerah, therefore, the rabbis tell us the whole gezerah that came down to Jewish people was also make-believe. You make believe, I'll also make believe. But nobody really knew that except for Mordechai. And in the beginning, he didn't know either. How does somebody know Hashem is only make believe that he's about to threaten the Jews? Of course, we took it seriously. But that's what happened in the end. In the meantime, Mordechai understands that this is a problem. And therefore he says, I have to counter this Avodah Zarah, this assimilation. Why is this such a terrible accusation against them? What did they really do? Because rabbis tell us ever since the Chet HaEgel, ever since the sin of the golden calf, there's always a shemetz. There was always a little bit left over of that egel, of that worshipping the golden calf, whether it's money, whether it's giving kavod to somebody who's an idol worshiper, because of the problem of assimilation, of getting too close to those who have an opposite agenda to us. And in some ways, eventually, if a Jew gets too close, his Judaism, his Jewishness is diluted. And eventually he allows himself to do all sorts of things. So Mordechai has to come out against this Avodah Zarah. And according to the Midrash, Haman was wearing on him an Avodah Zarah. So he said, I'm not going to bow down to you. You represent the Avodah Zarah. But it's more than that. It's not just the Avodah Zarah that's on Haman and that it is Haman. It's Amalek. He is a threat. He's the biggest threat to the Jewish people. We're not going to give in to him, to what he's trying to do. And on top of that, Mordechai is a symbol. He's a figurehead. He's the leader of the Jewish people. Major head of the Sanhedrin. For him to bow down, you know what kind of an example that would be? Oh, if he did it, for sure we could do it. That is the great risk here of Hilul Hashem. That is the great risk of being a bad example. And even though it meant risking, he knew that this would not risk the fate of the Jewish people because he was doing the right thing. He was doing something called Mesirut Nefesh, giving his life for something, L'Shem Shamayim. There are many, many stories of Jews who acted b'Mesirut Nefesh, even though they didn't have to. There was a man in the Holocaust, at the very, very end of the Holocaust, when the Germans saw that the Russian tanks approaching, and they're about to run away. They gathered a bunch of Jews, and they said, we're all going to let you go now. And this man, who was the only one amongst that group who was somewhat religious, somewhat kept track of the holidays, and never ate non-kosher food, even though he was so hungry, that was the only man that they took aside and said, listen, you see this piece of pork? Eat it now. If not, we're going to shoot you. We're letting everybody go back to their homes, to their families, whatever families they can find. But you have a choice. You're going to eat this pork, we'll let you go home. If not, we shoot you. And he said, I have not put a non-kosher piece of food into my mouth throughout the whole time I was in this camp. You think I'm going to do that now, when everybody's being liberated? No way in the world. And they shot him. This man has a grandson. I'm not going to tell you the name right now. If you want to know, I'll tell you later. This grandson of his was a very successful businessman in Israel. And one day, in his office in Tel Aviv, gets a call from his wife. I didn't have time to prepare lunch. Can you go fetch some food? He's not religious. So he goes to one of his favorite places, not too far from his office, stands on line, because there was people before him. And at this particular place, they sell what's called in Israel basar lavan. Pork. Pork. You put it in a sandwich. And because he's aligned, all of a sudden he gets this flash. Wait a minute, what am I doing over here? Standing online to buy pork sandwiches? Where my grandfather gave his life for this. He was told the story by his father, who heard about his father being killed. What's going on? Either he's right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and he's wrong. He says, most likely he's the one that's right and I'm the one that's wrong. Most likely. I mean, he started having a whole argument with himself. And the rest is history. Today he is the head of the greatest Baal Teshuvah movement in the world, Arachim. And because of his efforts, because of his Teshuvah, and because of his inspiration, many Jews have done Teshuvah. And all of this because of a grandfather who gave his life for not eating a piece of pork. It's not even avodah zarah. It's not even idol worshipping. You're allowed to, if you're in danger, if you're starving, you can eat almost anything. Mesirut nefesh. Because of Mesirut nefesh, look what happened to his son Baruch Hashem. Tremendous man. Tremendous zechuyot, tremendous merits. Tremendous teshuvah. And all goes to the credit of who? Of his grandfather. That is the power of Mesirut nefesh. Being strong. And that is what Mordechai Yehudi realized that needs to be done to save Am Yisrael is an act of Mesirut Nefesh. Mesirut Nefesh means giving your life, be willing to sacrifice your life if necessary. Haman Rasha realizes that Am Yisrael is very stubborn, very strong, and he's smart. He knows that the secret of the Jewish people lies in their children. If I can somehow get rid of the children, if I can somehow get rid of the Torah, they will have no standing whatsoever. That is exactly why the Germans, when they went into a Jewish village or town, the first ones who they got was the rabbiner, the rabbi. Get him away, get him to give up, humiliate him, and you've weakened everybody's resolve to fight. Why have people fight against you? Let's make the job easy. So let's get the rabbiner. Someone says, let me get the children. Let me get them away from Torah. Otherwise, there's a tremendous zechut. They have a tremendous protection. One who studies Torah has a tremendous protection surrounding him. And therefore, he was going to go after the kids too. But that didn't help. A lot of people have many questions about why rabbis do certain things, about why things are done in a particular way. They have to be very careful before they begin to accuse, because it's very possible that they are the ones that are wrong in their judgment. And the one example that I'd like to mention that makes a lot of people, including myself, uncomfortable sometimes, is when all of us perhaps one day may be standing online to see a great tzaddik, mekubal, and rabbi, and all of a sudden from the back door goes in another individual who's wealthy, and everybody's waiting in line 2-3 hours. Wouldn't that bother you? We would say, is that fair? We're waiting a couple hours just because that guy gives a lot of money to this rabbi. He's giving him, as we call it, protectia. He's giving him special treatment. Is that right? Is that fair? What would you say? Anybody have an opinion? Is that right what the rabbi is doing, or that's wrong? And I'm telling you, I'm sometimes uncomfortable with it. But Baruch Hashem, at this stage in my life, I understand things a little bit differently than I did when I was younger. So what would you say to something like that? After all, there is room to say that it's not fair. Anybody want to give his opinion? No, the reason is he's rich. Yeah, that's the reason. No, you're right. There's no other reason. If there's another reason, fine. No, the reason is he's rich. He gives a lot of money to the rabbi. What's that? I'm sorry? It's not fair? Why? So you'll wait a couple hours. What's the big? It's not that he's not going to see you. He's just not going to see you right away. Remember, this is not a bus where we're all standing in line and somebody jumps in like they do in Israel. Everybody trying to push you out of the way. This is a line. Everybody's going to get in eventually. A lot of people think it's not fair. Now, does anybody want to say something different? It appears to be like a bribe. Anybody else want to say something? Is there any reason why this would be correct to do? The answer is yes. The rabbis tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives kavod to the ashir, to the wealthy man, by giving him money. That is a form of kavod. We also have to give kavod to those who are wealthy. It is not flattery. You're not allowed to flatter anybody. That's completely asur. It's wrong. Except your wife and your husband. It's a mitzvah to make them feel good. That's different. But somebody else, just to be on his good side, just to convince him to hire you or things like that, asur, forbidden. So what is this, bribery? No. Hashem gives him kavod, we need to give him kavod. The rabbi who's giving that man kavod, it's not only because he's wealthy, it's because this man really supports the rabbi's institutions, maybe. He gives maybe $200, $300, $400, $500,000 a year, which helps tremendously. He's entitled to go in earlier. Who is to say that he should wait in line like everybody else? I mean, yes, people are equal in some ways, but there are merits to those who are greater contributors. After all, who sits on the front row when there is guests of honor? What are guests of honor? No. Let him sit in the back with the rest of us. No, he's the guest of honor for what he did. I just gave you an example where it's very easy for one to lose himself, for one to misunderstand, for one to complain, for one not to see clearly. But if you study that Torah, if you look at things properly with the proper eyes, you will see that it's not necessarily wrong, unless of course there's bribery involved, things like that, or it's not, where the man is really a corrupt man and he's trying to get through by using a bribe, by bribing the Gabaim, for example. Let me in. Here, take some money under the table. That's different. But when it's somebody that is known, big supporter, influential person, and especially if there's something important that he needs to discuss with the rabbi, yes, important things go before. We wouldn't want to say less important, but that's up to the rabbi's discretion to decide.
What if the money that he makes is corrupt?
Well, hopefully the rabbi will not use it for his holy project. Right. The rabbis who used to receive money that was not 100% kosher would tend to use it to feed the horses. In the days where they had horses, that food would go for the horses, but not to feed the mouths of the Bachurei Yeshiva, of those studying Torah. Because you're right, the money did not necessarily come from the best sources. And some would not even accept the money. So that's a whole different question, whether you should accept or not accept. Anyway, Mordechai is not the only one to act with Misirut Nefesh. Esther gets the message, and she also does something with Misirut Nefesh, self-sacrifice. She's willing to risk her life to go into Achashverosh and to slowly but surely tell him to undo this decree by inviting him to parties and so forth. She has a whole plan. So she's risking her life too. She realizes this is what needs to be done. She eventually calls for a major fast, 3-day fasts. Can you imagine? We have a hard time fasting one day. 3 days, 72 hours. Each one 24-hour fast, no breaks in between. That's very difficult. But that is a major, major kapara. Anybody who fasted 72 hours, the Kabbalah says it's like he fasted 40 days straight. In other words, it's only during the day, not during the night. 3 24-hour fasts is comparable to 40 days fasting just during the day, from morning till the night. Also not an easy task. The merit of the fast is what do we do when we fast? We abstain from food. This was an atonement for the hana'ah, for the enjoyment, the benefit that they received in the Seudah, in the party of Achashverosh. The fasting itself is a big kapara. It's a big form of teshuvah, of repentance, of turning to Hashem by depriving your body from benefit, from any benefit, any food. But here too, it was a tikkun. Esther embarked on something that was also a tikkun for the Jewish people. Bring them together, just like they came together for something not good. Bring them together now for something good. Lech kenos et kol haYehudim, assemble them for something good, for a fast, for prayer. And that is one of the reasons why we have a Seudat Purim. The meal of Purim is a meal of a mitzvah. It's a Seudat mitzvah this Friday, that we will all sit down and have a meal, not just to enjoy ourselves, not just to have food and drink, but to really have a Seudah, a proper Seudah, a Seudah shel mitzvah, a Seudah of Hodaya, of thanksgiving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is always the right thing to do whenever you were involved in a miracle. A woman that has just given birth to a girl. Some people are just happy when it's a boy. If it's a girl, forget it, they say. They don't even go visit their wife at the hospital. What? It's a girl? Okay. Forget it. Yeah, I've heard those kind of reactions from men. Be happy. She's a healthy child. Some people don't even have any child. So there's a mitzvah to say thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's in Birkat HaGomel, when the men go up to the Torah, or whether it's a Seudat Hodaya, a meal of thanksgiving, and during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, it was through a Korban Todah, through a sacrifice that was brought. So they both, Mordechai and Esther, they're both involved in acts of Misirut Nefesh, in acts that will be a tikkun for Am Yisrael. What other tikkunim do we have in Purim? What else do we do in Purim besides have a meal? Mishloach manot, ish lere'eo, and matanot le'evyonim. We send gifts. Why do we send gifts? I think you should buy your wife flowers every day, not just once a week, not just once in a while. Wouldn't it be nice? I think all the women would be happy, right? I have to ask the women, but right? You would be happy if you got flowers? Or maybe not, because then it would be something so routine, it wouldn't be special. Well, but anyway, wouldn't it be nice if we send gifts to each other more often? Why just once a year? Mishloach manot ishner, just once a year. It has to do with the tikkun. What's the tikkun? Haman made a statement. And this statement had in it also an accusation. Everything that he's saying is meant to accuse the Jews. Am mefuzar mefurad. He tells Ahashverosh, this nation is all over the place. Wherever you go, you see them. They're not together. They're not united. You can easily defeat them. They're weak. They don't make good citizens. There's no unity amongst them. We fixed that too. Yes, we are united. We get gifts, an exchange of gifts, as we call it in English. Gifts to each other. Matanot la'evyonim. We don't forget about the poor. What does the poor have to do with it? Because in Purim we're very happy. Mishenichnas adar marbim besimcha. We're extremely happy. We're happy for the miracles. We're happy for Kadosh Baruch Hu having saved us back then. And throughout the history, throughout the diaspora, it is incredible how a small little lamb was able to survive among 70 wolves. So we recognize that. So we're thankful to him. Hashem says, you really want to be happy? True happiness is when you make those who are not happy, happy. You make the poor happy too. The widows, the orphans, those who are poor. That is true happiness. Happiness is not something just for you to be by yourself with your family. If you really want to celebrate happiness, in other words, truly be happy, is you bring into your home those who are not happy and make them happy. So we also remember the poor, and we also give matanot la'evyonim. We give charity, and we don't analyze, do you really need it? How much do you need? Is it really, maybe he's a crook, maybe he doesn't need it. A whole year we are entitled, according to the halakha, to investigate. We're going to give our hard-earned money to someone. Maybe he doesn't really need the money, maybe he's a crook. You have to be careful. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt. If you're in doubt, give less. You're entitled to ask for some proof. You claim that there's a medical emergency or there was one, that you have a debt, then prove me some paperwork. Maybe it was forged. Everything is possible, but you can't be so negative and so harsh. It's better to be safe on the side that this man probably needs, then okay, maybe he didn't need it as much. Our tradition tells us something very interesting, that if you really give tzedakah properly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yazmin lecha aniyim hagunim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make sure that the poor who knock on your door will be the poor who are genuinely poor, who really need the money for food and for shelter, and not for drugs and booze. Yeah, some people just need the money for these kind of things. So if you want your money to go for a good cause, if you have in mind that you're doing really tzedakah l'shem shamayim, you're looking for the ones to help, and you give it with a good heart and you're generous about it, then Hashem will make sure that the good people, the one that really need it, will come knocking on your door. Otherwise, the money that is not given to the tzedakah, you know where it ends up going to? Attorneys, flat tires, root canals, blown engine, or head gasket, whatever it is. All these other little things. Eventually the money will go away anyway. So why don't you give it for a good cause? And have a mitzvah as a result of doing the good deed too. So therefore, Chag Purim is a time of tikkunim. It is a time that we actually repair that which was not done correctly in the past. Mordechai Yehudi knew what he was doing, and therefore he set out on an important job to bring Am Yisrael to do teshuvah for whatever it is that they did, even if it requires mesirut nefesh, the willingness to go al kiddush Hashem, to give one's life. I want to briefly go over the main points of the Megillah. After all, when we read the Megillah, it is not clear what is happening. In the very beginning, it doesn't make sense. Hashverosh has a very, very famous wife and princess, Vashti Malka. But because she insulted him, and how did she insult him? She basically objected to appearing naked in front of all the ministers. He invited all his friends, all his buddies. He's going to show off his wife, and he asked her to come naked. And somebody once asked me, where does it say that? It doesn't say that. It says that in the Midrash. Not everything is written in the Megillah itself. The Megillah is basically a brief description of the story, but if you want all the juicy details, you have to go to the Midrash. The Midrash has a lot of interesting details. He asked her something which was not nice. And she was a feminist, I guess you can call it, right? And proud. Ma pitom. He's going to tell me to do something like that, just so you can show off my beauty. And she did not want to. And he hanged her. Basically, just like, what was it, King Henry IV? Which one was it that killed? You should know, right? Yeah. King Henry VIII. How many? Was it 4 or 7? 3? 6 wives, but 3 he hanged? 3? Yeah. Yeah. So he hangs her. And then, what happens after that? He's told, you need to have a wife. Let's get the nicest one in the kingdom. We're going to have a beauty contest. I think that's where it started off, right? Miss Universe? It must have started in Iran, in Persia. They had a beauty contest of all the beautiful girls, and Esther Amalka was one. And she became the queen too. Esther, of all people, you start seeing that there is a divine plan. There's a script here. But we don't understand it. Now, we read it every year, so we know what's the end. But in the beginning, you can't figure this one out. And in the midst of all of this, there is this Mordechai Yehudi, who is Esther's uncle, who happens to overhear a conversation, not in the Persian of then. They spoke a different Persian back then than today. It's not the language of the location. He overhears 2 people, Biktam Teresh, speaking in Turkish. Completely different language than the language was they were. And this is a time when not too many people know other languages. Mordechai, who was on the Sanhedrin, had to know languages. He had to know other tongues to be able to communicate with other Jews. And they thought, Jew? What does a Jew know? He barely knows Farsi. He barely knows the language of the place. All they know is Yiddish, right? So they felt that it's comfortable, it's okay for them to speak, and nobody will understand what they're saying. And they were plotting to poison the king. And sure enough, Mordechai is at that spot at that time, overhearing a conversation that they're going to kill the king. It is because of his overhearing the conversation that he saves Achashverosh's life, and it is because of that Achashverosh eventually pays back Mordechai at the very, very last moment, when Haman is ready to hang Mordechai. He's had it. He's fed up. And everybody's giving him the advice, go just hang him. And what happens in the end? Well, that night, Achashverosh couldn't sleep. And because he couldn't sleep, well, what am I going to grab? They didn't have novels in those days, to read a novel. They didn't have TVs, right? So what does somebody do who can't fall asleep? And they didn't have that medication that puts you to sleep. So he decides, if I'm already up, I'm going to read the history book of my reign. What has happened in the past couple of years, any major events. Like we sometimes review an album. Oh, remember this, remember that. That's what he decided to do. You think he decided on his own? It was only Hashemayim. And there he sees that Mordechai, Yehudi, saved his life. He says, hey, wait a minute, did we ever do anything for him? Did we ever pay him back? And they said no. And sure enough, as he's finishing to read and planning to repay him, Haman HaRasha comes with this plan to hang Mordechai. But before he can open up his mouth, Achashverosh tells Haman, you're my advisor. What's the best way of rewarding somebody that saved the king's life? And Haman is thinking to himself, oh, Baruch Hashem, finally he wants to give me some credit. Says, you put him the crown, you ride him on a horse, the horse of the king, you dress him in the best clothing possible, and you take him in public and you announce for everybody, this is the man who the king favors. This man deserves all the kavod for what he did. Great idea. Go ahead and immediately do that to Mordechai Yehudi. You can imagine what's going on in his heart, in his head, but no questions asked. The king says, and that's what he does. So as he's going down the road, taking Mordechai Yehudi, riding on the horse, guess who peeks out her balcony? Haman's daughter. Haman's daughter peeks out the balcony and she sees what appears to be her father. Who else would be riding the king's horse with the crown of the king on his head? This must be her father. And who's leading the horse? Baruch Hashem, it must be my father finally got his revenge. It must be Mordechai leading the horse. So she went to the bathroom. And in those days, they had what we call today more or less a septic tank indoors, where all the dirt from the bathroom goes into a hole, and every so often people come to clean it. For those of you who lived in Iran years ago, you may remember there were people who would come once a month, twice a month to clean up, to get and it would be very smelly. Anyway, so she had a whole bunch of this dirt stored in the hole, puts it all into a bucket, and as soon as the horse comes close, she pours it over the head of who? Of her father, by mistake. Now, what happens now? What happens next? What would you do if you got all this dirt coming crashing down on you from up there? Her father raises his head, and who did just that? And he sees his daughter. It was his daughter who threw all this dirt on him. And as soon as his eyes caught her eyes, could you imagine the shock that she had? And because of the shock that she had, she threw herself off the balcony and committed suicide. Now this important detail that is not written in the Megillah, but in the Midrash, remember it, because I'm going to remind you soon why this suicide is an important incident that occurred way past then. But what do we see so far? Is that there is tremendous ashgaha, but this ashgaha is not to be understood just yet, because even the name of Hashem does not appear in the Megillah. Even the name of Hashem. Go look for it. Where is it insinuated? In the word Hamelech. Wherever it says Hamelech, it means him too. He is the one that's moving all the pawns on the chessboard. He's making everything happen. But we can't understand it until at the very, very end, we're finally able to figure out what has happened over here. That everything is made believe there's a threat, imminent danger. Am Yisrael does teshuvah, and Baruch Hashem at the end they're able to get out of it. Mordechai Yehudi, let's go back to him for a moment. When he first saw the danger and realized that this could mean total annihilation, what did he think to himself? He obviously was scared like any Jew would be scared. In those days, we don't really have prophets anymore. Who are you going to ask? There's no Kohen Gadol with Urim Tumim to ask him. How are you going to know what this is? So there was one way to figure out was to go to children who just finished their school and approach them and ask them, what pasuk did they just learn today? You go with a question in your mind, if you had a question that was in your mind, and you approach a child. The first child you meet, what pasuk did you learn today? And they were learning pasukim every day. So here he's bothered, he's worried, afraid. So he goes over, and the first child he meets tells him, the pasuk we learned today in school was, Utsu etza vetufar, dabru davar velo yakum. As soon as he heard those words, he was overjoyed. Because what those words mean is that the nations may plot many things against us, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu will thwart, will cancel their plots. Dabru davar velo yakum. Talk all day long about what you plan to do against the Jews. Velo yakum, nothing will happen in the end. So as soon as he hears these pesukim, these words of comfort, he says, Baruch Hashem, right now I just got to figure out a way of bringing Am Yisrael closer to Hashem. But I know that we're not in imminent danger. Nevertheless, we can't just sit quiet and do nothing. We still have to do teshuvah. But that is exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for Am Yisrael to do. For Am Yisrael to do teshuvah, and as soon as they do teshuvah, what do they see? They see that the same danger that was coming out against them, the man is eliminated. What he wanted to do to us happened to him and to his children. And eventually that is exactly what will happen right before Mashiach comes. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring the nations against us, and we will be in imminent danger, and there will be wars. But in the end, Utsu esa vetufar dabru davar velo yakum. In other words, they will plot, but they will not succeed. This is one of the messages of the Megillah. There are some additional messages, and one of them you hopefully understood with Hashverosh staying up all night. Hinei lo yanum velo yishan shomer Israel. There was once upon a time a king who asked the rabbi, why does it say Hinei lo yanum velo yishan? That's redundant. He doesn't slumber, lo yanum, velo yishan, he doesn't sleep. Well, just say he doesn't sleep. Why does it say twice? Hinei lo yanum velo yishan. So the rabbi says, you know what, that's a good question, I don't know. He says, I have an answer. The Jewish people in that country were in great danger. But because that king was up one night and couldn't fall asleep, I'm not telling you the whole story, this is for another time. But because that king was up that night, he was able to figure out who the true troublemakers were and cancel any imminent decrees against the Jews. So he tells the rabbi, Hinei lo yanum, Hashem doesn't sleep himself. Velo yishan, he doesn't allow us to sleep. Why? Shomer Israel, because he wants to look over you. So he doesn't make the king sleep, so that we should be able to protect you, so we should be able to figure out things that we would not have known. So that is the idea of Hashverosh staying up a whole night. And because he stood up, he was able to do something for Mordechai. So you see from all of this that the Yad Hashem is mechavenet over here, that it's the hand of Hashem that is driving everything over here. Another very important point in the Megillah of Esther is also found in Mordechai. The rabbis tell us that when it says lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh, it's in the future tense. Mordechai did not bow down, not in the past, in the future, meaning that we should learn from this that in the future, whenever we are faced with choices of giving up our faith, our religion, whenever we are pressured to give up Shabbat, don't bow down to the goy. Don't give in, like the story I told you with the pork. Lo litrapes. Don't bow down to the goy. There was once an incident where a goy who was very good friends with a Jew, a great rabbi, cornered him in the middle of the night and says, you better eat this pork now with me. If not, I will kill you. And this rabbi was completely surprised. This goy was a good goy, never bothered him, never threatened him. And here, what is he trying to do? And the rabbi said, I'm sorry, I'm willing to say Shema Yisrael, allow me to say my vidui now, but I'm not going to eat. So the goy says to him, Rabbi, congratulations. Had you eaten, I would have killed you. I love true Jews who have integrity and strength and do not just give up their Judaism whenever it suits them. So this is a little bit of an opposite story of what I told you before. You have to be very careful because Hashem is always testing us. Always testing us. And even though we know the halakha, we know what to do and what not to do, but sometimes we don't. So we have to be careful. Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachave is an important lesson. Be strong. If you can't find a job unless they tell you have to work on the Sabbath, that's not meant for you. I like to sometimes tease people and ask them, tell me, what do you do if you see $100 bills in the street on Shabbat? 100 bills. How much is that? $10,000. A lot of money, right? What would you do? On Shabbat, you're not allowed to touch muktzeh. It's money. Muktzeh, you can't touch the money. So one smart aleck told me, well, the halakha says I'm allowed to sit there until Motzei Shabbat. I said, that's good if it's Shabbat in the afternoon. What if it's Friday night? Another one tells me, well, it says I can kick it to the side. I'm using my foot, not my hand. That would be okay, right? I'm not touching it. As long as I don't kick it 6 to 8 feet, you're not allowed to move something 6 to 8 feet in the public place. Just a little bit so nobody can sit in the bushes. Come back after Shabbat. Somebody who truly has emunah and bitachon b'Hashem says to himself, if it's meant for me, then Hashem will give it to me in a kosher way. I won't have to rob it. I won't have to make it on Shabbat. I won't have to make it in a way which is asur. It's only a complete lack of emunah and bitachon, lack of faith and trust in Hashem, where somebody says, oh, this is an easy money. But if maybe it's not meant for you. If it has to come through a prohibited way, it's not meant for you. Hashem is testing you. We're always being tested. Another important point that we should never forget that is very clear and obvious in the Megillah is Afilu cherev chada munachat al tzavaro shel adam. Even if you see a sharp sword coming down on your neck, the guillotine, al yityaesh adam min harachamim, never give up hope. My sister's father-in-law, may he live a long, healthy life. He's, Baruch Hashem, still around. Holocaust survivor. He was already in the gas chambers. All that was missing was for the German to just push the button down, the switch, to let out the gas. But at the very last moment, the Germans came in, oh, I need a few more able-bodied Jews to do some work. And a few minutes after that, the camp was already liberated. Had there not been an intervention there, Miashamayim, of course, he wouldn't have been around. So never give up hope, even though you're already seeing the sword. The last minute, everything is possible. Another point is Lola Shevet B'Sha'ananut. As long as we're in the diaspora, it doesn't mean that we should be calm, everything is okay. Just because everything appears to be okay in this country does not mean that tomorrow things will be the same. Just like the German Jews thought that Berlin is Yerushalayim. No, it was not. It was never Yerushalayim, and they found out the hard way. They were kicked out, they were butchered. The Jews were in Spain a long time. And see what happened to them. Never think that you're okay, everything is fine, because Eretz Yisrael is our true home. And we always have to have Eretz Yisrael in our hearts and in our minds completely at all times. And it's not just for naught that the rabbis put it into our Siddur. So much mention of it, a lot of mentioning of Yerushalayim, of Tzion, of Eretz Yisrael. May we have the zechut of going there while we are alive, not in a coffin. Some people go to Eretz Yisrael and they end in a coffin because they want to be buried there. We should go there while we're still alive. So we have to remember that this is not our home. Hashem has many messengers. One of those messengers was Harvonah. 2 messengers who, even though they were not kind, they were against the Achashverosh Biktam Teresh, they were still messengers. They wanted to assassinate the king. They still are used as messengers for Hashem's plot over here. But Harvonah is a positive messenger with positive news. What was the positive news of Harvonah? When Esther finally tells Achashverosh that this man, Haman Rasha, He's the one who wants to get us into trouble. He's the one that wants to kill us. He's the one that wants to eliminate us. Comes along Haravna. Oh, by the way, Ahashverosh, your honor. And this is the same Haman who wants to hang your best friend, Mordechai, on top of that big tree. As soon as Ahashverosh heard that was all he needed. Talu alav, hang him on his own tree. So Haman was hanged on his own tree. So that's what the pasuk says. Al timna tov mi be'alav, im yesh le'el yadecha la'asot. If you have any ability to help somebody, to say a kind word that will help somebody's case, don't hold back that kind word. If you're able to help somebody in any way possible, it's a big mitzvah. Another very important point, Et Sarah Yaakov, if Am Yisrael is in trouble, it means that they need to do teshuvah. That is why, as I said before, that is why we're in trouble to begin with. It must be that we have done something wrong, not the goyim. So instead of trying to figure out what should we do to please the Hamas, the Al-Qaeda, or what should we do how do we make peace with them? If they're coming after you, maybe there's something wrong with you. So the first thing to do is to examine ourselves. Perhaps there's something not right with us. I'd just like to end with one of the most fascinating details of the Megillah that escapes most of us. I just told you recently about somebody who committed suicide, right? The daughter of Haman. What's so important about that? In the entire Megillah, you will find 3 letters that are written in small case. All the letters are nice and big, normal size. 3 letters are small. You know, sometimes in the Chumash, you find a big letter. Even in the Shema Yisrael, you find the Ayin and the Dalet bigger than the rest of the letters. In the Shema Yisrael, you look in your Siddur. So we sometimes find bigger letters for greater emphasis, but here you find 3 small letters. Anybody recall which are the letters that are small and where they are? There's an, what is that? What now? The aleph that you're talking about is in the word Vayikra, in the Sefer Vayikra, in the Chumash, in the Torah. But in the Megillah, there are 3 small letters, and they are found in the names of the children of Haman that were hanged. How many? 10. And the minhag is to read the hanging of Haman and his kids, b'nishima achat, to read it all in one breath, if possible, because they were hanged at the same time. Nobody understood, at least the majority of the Jews did not understand all these years until recently, what those 3 letters there are doing, that they're smaller than the rest of them. All they are names of individuals who were hanged. And the letters are Taf, Shin, and Zayin. Anybody remember what happened in the year 1946? It was already 5707, but because it was before January, it was still 1946. The trial of Nuremberg. And what happened at the trial of Nuremberg? Who went to trial? Amalek. The cohorts of Hitler, Nazis. How many of them? 10. What happened to them? They were hanged. How many? 9. Who was the 10th that was not hanged, who nevertheless died? Goering. How did he die? He committed suicide. And guess what they say about Mr. Goering? He used to like to dress up like a girl. Yeah. He had this crazy idea that maybe he's a reincarnation of a woman. He somehow just behaved like that and pursued that and had an interest in that nobody ever understood until we were able to figure out what this Tafshin Zayin means. He's possibly the reincarnation of the daughter of Haman. And the rest of the 9, just like Haman was hanged then together with his children, so were they hanged again. The same Amalek, once again, in what year? They will be hanged again in the year Tafshin Zayin. So we have those 3 letters representing the year, a recurrence of the miracle of Purim. And in case you don't believe it, Ask Mr. Streicher, who was one of the ones that was taken to the gallows. Who was Streicher Yimach Shemo? He was in charge of the Nazi propaganda against the Jews. And as he's being led to the gallows, he calls out in a loud voice, Purim Fest 1946. The Jews have won again. They have a new Purim. Who asked you to say that? October, I believe it was, is not Purim. What does this have to do with Purim? Amalek knows the truth. They feel it deep down. As Hitler and Mashemo said himself, the entire war in the world, the only true conflict in the entire world is the conflict between the Jews and us. Everything else is a mirage, he says. North Korea, South Korea having a fight. Chad and Sudan having a fight. Most of you don't know what Sudan and Chad probably. But anyway, 2 countries in Africa. All these other countries having fights. He says, don't pay attention to nothing that's going on in the world, except there's only one major important fight. The Jews and us. Everything else is a mirage. And Streicher knew that. These 3 letters, therefore, were misunderstood. They're now understood to mean 1946, when the same thing happened in the past, Purim repeated itself, and once again, Am Yisrael is saved. This is a very important lesson for us to remember, that these days are mesugal. These are very propitious days for Am Yisrael to experience miracles again, if we prepare ourselves properly. And B'ezrat Hashem, if we do the right thing by being mitorer, by awakening the tshuva, by helping our brothers and sisters, by uniting together, by truly being happy to do the will of Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will once again bring back those miracles and reveal himself very, very soon, B'ezrat Hashem, when the Mashiach comes. Amen. So, in case I don't see you, have a happy Purim. And this may be the last Purim in Los Angeles, maybe. B'ezrat Hashem.